It was the summer of 2009 when Barry Cosby, a 36-year-old Texan with an adventurous spirit and a calm demeanor, told his family he needed a break, a temporary escape. Life had been heavy. His job was on the line, and the stress of a recent breakup weighed him down. But he didn't share all of that. What he did say was simple. He wanted to visit the breathtaking Yosemite National Park in California. Just some time alone with nature, to reset. His family supported the idea. Barry wasn't the impulsive type. He was organized, a planner. If anyone could safely hike Yosemite's trails alone, it was him. He packed his green Ford Taurus, double-checked his gear, and drove off with a smile, promising to call once he reached the park's visitor center. That call never came. The last confirmed sighting of Barry was at a gas station near Fresno, where he bought bottled water, trail mix, and a disposable camera. Surveillance footage showed him smiling, chatting briefly with the cashier, and driving off at around 3:40 p.m. Nothing seemed unusual, but 3 days later, when Barry hadn't checked in, his sister reported him missing. Park rangers were alerted. They found his car a day later, abandoned near Tioga Pass, an isolated entrance on the eastern side of Yosemite. The vehicle was locked, with no signs of damage or forced entry. Inside they found his backpack, an unopened map of the park, a water bottle still sealed, and a notebook filled with meticulous plans. Trail routes, time estimates, rest stops. But something was off. None of those plans matched the location of the car. It was as if he'd driven somewhere completely different from what he intended. The search began immediately. Helicopters scanned the cliffs. Ground teams spread across trailheads. Search dogs followed dozens of false leads. The terrain was punishing. Steep drops, sudden weather shifts, dense forests where a person could vanish in a blink. But no trace of Barry. Not a single footprint, item of clothing, or shred of evidence suggesting where he had gone. Even experienced trackers were baffled. The only known was this: Barry Cosby had driven into Yosemite and vanished, leaving behind a car, a plan he never followed, and questions that no one could answer. Then came the theories. Some believed he suffered a fall. Perhaps he took an unplanned detour and met with misfortune in one of Yosemite's many hidden ravines. Others whispered darker possibilities, that Barry never meant to return, that he had gone there to disappear. But those who knew him rejected that idea. Barry was dependable, responsible. He left no goodbye note, made no financial moves suggesting an escape. And the car? Why would he lock it, leave his supplies, and walk off into the wilderness unprepared? The logic just didn't hold. Time passed, and search efforts dwindled. The park grew quiet again, and Barry's name faded from headlines. But for his family, silence became its own kind of torment. Because when someone vanishes into a place like Yosemite, you don't just lose them. You lose every version of what might have happened to them. And that loss has no closure. The weeks following Barry Cosby's disappearance were filled with escalating confusion and rising tension. His family flew from Texas to California, desperate for answers. They met with rangers, sheriffs, and search teams, clutching recent photos of Barry, handing out flyers, and retracing every possible route he could have taken. But Yosemite isn't just a park. It's a vast, wild expanse of 1,187 square miles, with hundreds of hidden pockets where someone could simply vanish. The terrain doesn't forgive mistakes. At night, temperatures drop rapidly. Daylight offers only a limited window for search operations. Time was their enemy from the moment Barry went missing. The car, his green Ford Taurus, remained the most puzzling clue. It was discovered on a narrow turnout off Tioga Road, a less trafficked path mostly used by locals and seasoned hikers. The location didn't match any of the trails Barry had written down in his notebook. Even stranger, the gas tank was nearly full, suggesting he hadn't driven far since refueling in Fresno. That disposable camera he bought? Still in its package, unopened. Every detail inside the vehicle screamed untouched. No signs of panic, no struggle, no hasty departure. It looked as if Barry had calmly parked, stepped out for a short walk, and simply never returned. Investigators explored every angle. They brought in scent dogs again, starting at the vehicle and spiraling outward. At one point, a dog seemed to catch a faint trace leading toward a ravine about 300 yards away. Teams scoured the area, rappelling into the rocky crevice and combing the brush. Nothing. Not even a torn piece of fabric. They expanded the radius, set up motion sensor cameras, interviewed campers, hikers, and anyone who had checked into lodges or nearby campsites during that week. No one had seen Barry. Not once. Media outlets picked up the story. A missing tourist in one of America's most iconic national parks. It was the kind of headline that stirred public fascination. But even as journalists arrived and the story spread, no new leads emerged. Psychics called in with visions. Conspiracy theorists wrote blog posts linking Barry's case to other strange Yosemite vanishings. And still, no solid clues surfaced. It was like he had been swallowed whole by the wilderness. His sister Amanda refused to give up. She started a website, shared Barry's story on forums and social media. She posted updates daily, sometimes hourly, pleading for help from hikers and travelers passing through the park. "Please check your photos," she wrote in one post, "even if you didn't know him. Maybe you captured something in the background. Anything." But those posts only returned sympathy, not solutions. As the weeks turned into months, the official search effort was scaled back. Barry's case shifted from active to cold, but his family returned year after year, holding small vigils at the turnout where the car was found. Each time they brought new flyers, new hope, and a single question that still echoed in the mountain air. Why? Why would a man so prepared, so precise, end up disappearing without leaving a trace? Unsettling whispers began to circulate among locals and veteran rangers. They spoke quietly of a pattern. People vanishing in Yosemite under similarly strange circumstances, the kind of stories not published in guidebooks. Men and women who left behind vehicles, journals, maps, just like Barry. The disappearances never made sense, and while most could be written off as accidents, some had eerie overlaps. Locations too remote, belongings too intact, outcomes too empty. Barry's case wasn't the first, and deep down, some feared it wouldn't be the last. By the time autumn rolled into Yosemite in 2009, the vibrant greens of summer had turned to gold and crimson, blanketing the valley floor in silence. But for the Cosby family, especially Amanda, the changing seasons only deepened the chill of unanswered questions. She began digging into every record she could find. Other disappearances in the park, ranger reports, historical incidents, anything that might draw a parallel to Barry's vanishing. That's when she stumbled across something disturbing. In the past 10 years alone, over 30 people had gone missing in Yosemite. Some were eventually found, usually deceased after a fall or exposure. But others, like Barry, had simply evaporated. No body, no gear, no sign. Amanda's obsession grew. She mapped the disappearances, marked dates, weather patterns, car locations. What she noticed unnerved her. A concentration of cases in the vicinity of Tioga Pass, exactly where Barry's car had been found. That area wasn't just remote, it was notoriously unpredictable. Fog could roll in within minutes. Animal paths and man-made trails often crisscrossed, leading even seasoned hikers astray. And then there was the altitude, over 9,000 feet above sea level, making even simple exertion more difficult. But it wasn't just nature that made Tioga Pass unsettling. Locals whispered stories about shadows that moved against the grain of light, about sudden silences so deep they drowned out thought. Campers reported waking up in the middle of the night, certain they'd heard footsteps circling their tents, only to find no one. Still, Amanda pressed forward. She contacted survival experts, even retired military personnel, asking what would cause a healthy, prepared man to abandon his supplies, step into one of the most treacherous parts of Yosemite, and never come back. Theories ranged from bear attacks to altitude sickness-induced confusion, to slipping into one of the many narrow fissures that thread through the region's granite underbelly. But every theory hit the same wall: the absence of anything. No blood, no torn clothing, no footprints, as if Barry had walked through a doorway into something else entirely. Desperate, Amanda returned to the turnout where Barry's car had been discovered. She stood in the fading daylight, staring into the distance. The air was thin, dry, and quiet. Too quiet. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A tree, massive and scorched black at its base, stood about 30 feet beyond the guardrail. A scarred veteran of a past lightning strike, but at its roots, partially obscured by a tangle of weeds and pine needles, she saw a scrap of something dark. Her heart pounded. She climbed down, brushed it away, and found a torn piece of denim. Old, sun-bleached, faded almost to gray. It could have been from anything: a hiker's jeans, a ranger's work pants. But in that moment, Amanda was convinced. It was his. It had to be. She turned it in immediately. Rangers took it, labeled it, and sent it for DNA testing. Weeks passed. Nothing. No match. No conclusion. It was either too degraded or not Barry's at all. Another dead end. Another wound that refused to close. That night, Amanda sat alone in her motel room looking through Barry's notebook. She flipped to the back, to a page she hadn't noticed before. A single sentence, written hastily: "If anything happens, look past the map." No explanation. No date. Just those words, dangling like a riddle. She stared at them for hours. What did he mean? Past the map? Past the trails? Past the boundaries? Or was it something else entirely? Amanda couldn't shake the cryptic sentence. If anything happens, look past the map. It haunted her. She scanned the notebook again, this time examining the margins, flipping each page under lamplight. That phrase didn't match the tone of Barry's meticulous planning. His notes were clear, methodical: trail names, times, altitudes, gear checklists. But this line was rushed, scribbled in ink that had slightly bled into the paper fibers, as if written under pressure. Amanda considered it a message. Not a clue he'd drop casually, but something deliberate, meant to be found. But what was past the map? She turned to the park's topographical charts. She overlaid Barry's intended routes against where his car had been discovered, searching for hidden spaces, unmarked canyons, abandoned trails. And there, in the white space beyond the printed paths, she found something. An old trailhead marked only in older maps, discontinued in the early 90s after a rock slide had made it unstable. It wasn't part of any modern guide. It lay just 2 miles from Barry's last known location. With no official search ongoing, Amanda returned with a volunteer named Luis, an off-duty firefighter and amateur mountaineer, who had contacted her after reading Barry's story online. The two hiked early, taking a steep, loose path down into what the locals called Dead Horse Hollow, a name that didn't show up on any official signage. The terrain was brutal. Loose shale shifted underfoot. Jagged granite walls loomed on either side. They passed a stream so narrow it seemed to vanish beneath the rock. Then, after hours of silence, Amanda stopped. There, jammed between 2 boulders, was a twisted piece of black plastic. Luis knelt down, pried it free. It was the corner of a watch face. Cracked. Dead. Faint letters barely visible. Citizen Eco Drive. The same brand Barry wore every day. Amanda trembled. It wasn't conclusive proof, but the terrain here was so remote, so devoid of foot traffic, the odds of it belonging to a random hiker seemed slim. Luis bagged the fragment in a Ziploc, labeled it, and GPS marked the spot. But as they turned to explore further, a strange sensation washed over them, like the air itself grew heavier. The sun, still shining above the valley, seemed to dim slightly, filtered through a layer of haze. Neither of them spoke of it then, but both later admitted it felt like being watched. They pressed on. Minutes later, Luis stopped abruptly. On the ground ahead, partially buried in moss and dirt, was a sock. Gray, cotton, torn at the ankle seam. Amanda dropped to her knees. She knew this sock. She had done Barry's laundry during one of his visits home. A hole in the heel, a faded logo near the top. She held it up, but her voice caught in her throat. Luis gently took it from her. "Let's keep going," he said. "We're close to something." They continued for another hour, moving slower now. Then, just before the path curved around a massive granite outcrop, Amanda spotted what looked like a structure. A rusted metal frame, half collapsed, overtaken by underbrush. It looked like an old ranger station or supply hut, forgotten and consumed by the wilderness. They approached cautiously. The door was gone. The roof sagged. Inside, they found shattered glass, a broken lantern, and remnants of what might have been a sleeping bag. No names, no IDs, no Barry. But on the wall, carved crudely into the wooden frame, were 3 letters. BC. Amanda ran her fingers over them. She whispered his name. She was sure of it now. Barry had been here, but the question remained. Why had he come this far off the map? What had pulled him off his planned route, away from safety, into this hidden pocket of the park, where even maps dared not reach? Amanda couldn't sleep that night. Back in her motel room, her hands still smelled of moss and rust. The initials carved into the wood, BC, looped endlessly in her mind. Barry Cosby. She was certain he had reached that forgotten outpost, but the real question was when. Had he made it there the day he vanished? Days later, wounded and lost? Or had he been led there, drawn by something not written in any trail guide or ranger handbook? She emailed the GPS coordinates of the site to the local sheriff's office, attaching photos of the initials, the sock, and the broken watch face. But she knew the response would be the same. "Thank you. We'll review the information." And then nothing. The case was cold. Resources were limited. Without a body, without undeniable evidence of foul play, there was little they could do. So Amanda turned to the one source of help she still trusted, Luis. Together they planned a return to Dead Horse Hollow. This time, they would push deeper, follow the stream that vanished beneath the rocks, go where even the rangers wouldn't. The next morning, they set out before sunrise. Luis brought climbing gear, portable lanterns, and emergency flares. Amanda carried a photo of Barry, the tattered sock, and the notebook. The air was colder than before. The trail felt steeper, the forest somehow quieter. When they reached the rusted outpost again, Amanda paused. The air inside the structure smelled faintly of decay and iron, but there was nothing new, no clue, no sign of recent presence. They pressed on. Near the stream bed, they found the rocks slick with dew, shaded from the sun by towering pines. Amanda followed the flow with her eyes, watching it disappear into a crevice beneath a shelf of granite. "We go in?" she asked. Luis nodded solemnly. He tied off a rope, secured his harness, and lowered himself down. Amanda followed, heart pounding. The air turned colder. The walls tightened. For several minutes they moved in near darkness, their headlamps illuminating only inches ahead. Then came a smell, stale, earthy, and sharp, like wet stone mixed with something older. Ahead, the passage opened into a narrow chamber barely wide enough for them to crouch. And there, in the middle of the stone floor, was something unnatural. A circle of stacked rocks, deliberate, precise. Not random debris, but arranged, ritualistic. Inside the circle was a tangle of twine, feathers, a half-burned photo of what looked like a mountain skyline, and something Amanda wasn't ready for: a shoelace. Flat, dark gray, with the exact pattern of Barry's hiking boots. She knew it instantly. She had bought those boots with him 6 months before. Luis stared in silence. "This doesn't look like something he'd do," he said slowly. Amanda agreed. Barry wasn't spiritual. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't build altars in caves. So then who did? Had he found this? Was he drawn here by it? Or had someone, or something, placed it after he disappeared? Suddenly a sound echoed from deeper in the cavern. Soft, rhythmic, like stone tapping against stone. Amanda's flashlight flickered. Luis turned his headlamp toward the noise, but it vanished. Nothing. Just stillness again. But that sound, it hadn't been imagined. They both heard it. They both felt the shift in pressure, like the cave itself was breathing. Amanda stepped back, heart racing. "We need to mark this," Luis whispered. "But we shouldn't stay." They left a flare near the rock circle, noted the coordinates, and slowly made their way back to the surface. As they emerged into the sunlight, Amanda turned one last time toward the cave. Something had changed her. Not just what she'd found, but what she'd felt. A presence. A pressure. Like the story wasn't over. Like Barry's trail wasn't cold, just hidden. Buried under more than stone and time. After the discovery in the cave, Amanda's investigation shifted from one of logic and terrain to something more elusive: intuition. She no longer felt like she was following a trail. It was more like chasing echoes, pieces of her brother's presence scattered across the landscape like breadcrumbs. Back in town, she began asking questions that most people avoided. She visited older residents of nearby Lee Vining and June Lake, fishing towns with long memories and guarded stories. What she found disturbed her even more than the cave. Several locals, when pressed gently, admitted to hearing stories, old rumors, about the Vanishing Path, a stretch of forgotten land near Tioga Pass where people stepped off the map and never came back. One woman, in her 70s, said her cousin had gone missing there in 1973. Same pattern: car left behind, no body, no answers. A man who had worked for the park in the 80s recalled a cluster of missing persons that never made the news. The files were quieted, lost in bureaucracy, suppressed maybe. "That land out there," he said, "it decides who comes back." Amanda began piecing together a terrifying pattern. Each story she uncovered shared eerie consistencies: experienced hikers, sudden disappearances, equipment left behind, no distress signals, and most chillingly, unexplainable final markers. Rock circles, symbols carved into trees, objects out of place. She compiled a timeline documenting nearly a dozen such disappearances within a 10-mile radius of Barry's last location. Too close to be coincidence. Luis was skeptical, but after what they'd seen in the cave, he admitted something unnatural might be at play. "We're not looking for a man anymore," he told her one night. "We're looking for a doorway." Amanda didn't disagree. She started dreaming about Barry. Not as he was, but surrounded by stone, whispering through the wind. In the dreams, he tried to speak, but no words came. Only that same sentence, repeating again and again. "Look past the map." Haunted by those dreams, Amanda returned alone to Yosemite 1 week later. Luis couldn't join her this time. She brought only a day pack, a compass, and Barry's notebook. She revisited the cave, only to find the flare she'd left extinguished, the rock circle partially collapsed. Something, or someone, had disturbed it. The shoelace was gone. She wandered upward beyond the cave, scrambling through deadfall and dry underbrush until she reached a narrow ridge with a view of the valley below. The wind howled, pushing her backward. And then there it was. A trail. Faint, nearly invisible, but unmistakable. Not a trail worn by hikers, but by something more persistent. Animal, human or otherwise. She followed it, boots crunching on brittle pine needles, branches clawing at her sleeves. After nearly an hour of weaving through gnarled trees and ancient stone, she found it. A clearing. Small, perfectly round, and silent. So silent, in fact, that she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. In the center of the clearing was a single tree, blackened like the one near Barry's car. At its base, barely visible under a pile of dry leaves, lay a plastic ID card, faded, scratched, but readable. Barry Cosby, Texas driver's license. Amanda collapsed to her knees. Tears blurred her vision. She clutched the card like a lifeline. Proof. Undeniable, physical proof that Barry had made it this far. But then she realized, if this was here, alone, left out in the open, what did that mean for him? As she stood, the wind shifted. A low hum moved through the clearing, like distant thunder or a deep growl from beneath the earth. The silence broke, replaced by the crackle of pine above. Something was watching. Amanda didn't wait. She marked the tree with red chalk, took a photo of the license, and turned back the way she came, not running, but walking fast, focused. Because something in her gut told her, this place wasn't meant to be seen twice. Amanda didn't speak during the drive back from Yosemite. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. The forest seemed to loom behind her like it had eyes. Every twist of the mountain road felt like something might step into the headlights, but nothing did. Just the dark, silent wilderness. When she finally reached cell service again, she called Luis. Her voice trembled as she recounted what she'd found. The hidden trail, the clearing, the scorched tree, and most of all, Barry's ID. It wasn't dropped, she said. It was placed. Luis met her that night. He examined the ID under a desk lamp, noting the scratches, the fading. It's been out there a while, he murmured. But it doesn't make sense. Why would it just be there, out in the open? Amanda didn't answer. She couldn't. Deep down, she was beginning to believe something terrible. That Barry hadn't just gotten lost. That he'd been led away. Taken. That clearing hadn't felt like part of the world she knew. It felt wrong, designed. And she was convinced Barry hadn't chosen to go there. They reported the discovery to authorities. A ranger was dispatched to the location 2 days later. But when he arrived at the marked tree, the ID was gone. The chalk had been washed away. No sign of the clearing's strange energy. No trail where Amanda had walked. She swore it had been there. She showed photos, but the GPS coordinates placed her in a location where no trail was listed, and where the forest was said to be too dense to traverse. Maybe you got turned around, the ranger suggested. Amanda left the office speechless, but the camera didn't lie. Her photo of the ID was clear, time-stamped, with Barry's name visible. Amanda uploaded it to her site, alongside a new message. I found proof. My brother was there, and something doesn't want him to be found. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of messages poured in, many from families of other missing persons. They shared stories, maps, strange encounters in Yosemite and other national parks. Flickering shadows, lost time, voices in the wind, rock formations that seemed to shift overnight. One message stood out. It was from a man named Ellis, a retired ranger who had worked Yosemite's eastern quadrant in the early 90s. I saw your brother's name, he wrote. Reminds me of a case we never filed. Young man, similar look, vanished 20 years ago near Gaylor Lakes. Same pattern. Car left locked, supplies untouched. The only thing we ever found was a boot print, too far from any trail to make sense. You're not crazy. Some places in that park, they erase people. Amanda arranged to meet Ellis. The man was in his 60s now, eyes tired but sharp. He brought an old park-issued binder, yellowed and frayed. Inside were notes on at least 5 disappearances never formally reported, all in the same region, near Tioga, Dead Horse Hollow, Gaylor, and a region marked only as Boundary 6, a nickname rangers used off the record. "We were told not to dig too deep," he said. "Budget reasons, liability. But the truth is, we didn't want to know." He leaned in. "We had a saying back then. If the trail disappears, you turn around. If it invites you forward, you run." Amanda swallowed hard, because Barry hadn't run. He had gone forward. Willingly? Maybe. But more likely, pulled. That night, Amanda returned to Barry's notebook. She flipped back to the sentence that started it all. "Look past the map." She stared at it, trying to decipher its full meaning. Then she noticed something. A faint impression beneath the words, like pressure from a pen dragging across another page. She shaded over it with pencil. Letters emerged. An address. Not in Yosemite. Not even in California. It was in Nevada, a tiny town called Leda. Population 13. Amanda had never heard Barry mention it, but she knew what she had to do next. Leda, Nevada, wasn't much more than a ghost town. A single road split the desert, lined with crumbling buildings, abandoned gas stations, and a silence thicker than the heat. Amanda arrived just after sunrise, following the coordinates she had unearthed in Barry's notebook. There were no hotels, no rangers, no tourists, only the wind scraping against rusted metal signs. It was the kind of place that didn't exist on GPS. You had to know it to find it. And somehow, Barry had known. The address led her to a boarded-up house at the edge of the settlement. The windows were covered in newspaper. The door, once painted green, now peeled in long, curling strips. Amanda stood there staring, unsure of what she was expecting. Then she knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. It creaked open. Inside, dust blanketed every surface. The air was stale with the scent of dry wood and thyme. A single wooden chair sat in the center of the room. On it, a box. Amanda stepped forward cautiously. The box was unmarked, simple pine, nailed shut. But on top of it was a Polaroid photo, faded but unmistakable. Barry, standing in front of a mountain, not smiling. His eyes wide, expression unreadable. He looked older, thinner, haunted. Amanda's breath caught. She opened the box. Inside were dozens of items. Barry's other hiking boot. A journal not from Yosemite, but filled with strange sketches, spirals, cave systems, coordinates, and references to dreams. One page simply read, "They listen in the stone." Another, "Not lost. Taken." Tucked between pages was a map of Yosemite, but different, hand-drawn, annotated with red ink. X's marked locations Amanda recognized: the turnout where the car had been found, the cave, the clearing, the rusted outpost, and others, places she hadn't been. Yet. In the corner of the room, Amanda spotted a tape recorder, old, covered in dust. She pressed play, static. Then a voice, Barry's voice. "If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing when I came here. I thought I was just hiking, just escaping. But there's something out there. In the rocks, in the wind, in the places past the map. You don't find them, they find you. And when they do, you're not yourself anymore. I didn't mean to stay. I swear, I tried to leave, but the trail kept changing. I kept hearing them, whispers. My name. They know my name." Silence. Then, more faintly, "If you come looking, be sure you want to find me. Because I'm not sure you'll find the version you remember." The tape clicked off. Amanda stood frozen. Her brother wasn't just missing. He was leaving messages, creating a breadcrumb trail not only across Yosemite, but through something deeper. Something otherworldly. She copied every coordinate from the map, took photos of the journal, packed the tape and photo. As she left the house, she turned back for a final look. On the inside of the door, carved into the wood, were the words, "Some trails go one way." Back in her car, Amanda stared at the road stretching into the Nevada horizon. She had choices now, locations to explore, mysteries to unravel. But no more illusions. Barry was out there, not lost, not gone, changed. And if she was going to find him, she had to go further, deeper, past the map. The case of Barry Cosby was never officially solved. His remains were never found. But his story continues to circulate among rangers, hikers, and those who venture into Yosemite's wilder corners. Some say he became a part of the land itself. Others believe he found something not meant for human eyes. What's certain is this: Barry Cosby vanished in Yosemite. But what vanished with him might have been far more than just a man.